So it's suspension time for this Falcon. I've got some springs and shocks ready to go for the front of my ute. Now these are King springs and Monroe shocks, and they have been used for a couple of decades now on these cars to great effect. Overstock, they really improve the handling, and also the ride height is much improved. Now as you can see, I don't have a ride height problem in terms of low, but I actually think the front's a little bit too low on this car. I've got some problems with my driveway, and also the front ride height does not quite match the rear ride height. So today I'm going to fix all that and put some higher springs onto the front of this car to match the rear. Whether you've got standard suspension or you want to fix your leaky shocks or whatever it may be, follow along if you also need to do this on your car, and let's get to it. So the first thing you're going to need is some tools, and here they are. Okay, have yourself a jack and some jack stands ready. Get a ratchet gun handy as well. Have a 7, a 10, a 14, a 17, an 18 and a 22mm socket ready. Have yourself a torque wrench, a ratchet and extensions, a hammer for persuasion, a torch so you can see in some of the dark spots. A 17mm thin spanner like this will be really handy. Have a shifting spanner ready as well, and have yourself some work gloves ready because you might cut yourself up without these. These are really good, they're cut proof, and they're readily available at my store if you want a pair, link below. And now that you've got your tools sorted, let's look at the springs and shocks you're also going to need, obviously. So find the correct springs that you want to put on your car. These are super lows for a BF Falcon, but King Springs sells quite a few different models for these cars. So yeah, just check with them which one is best for you. Their website is really good at finding the correct part number that you need to order. And then these Monroe GT Sport shocks complement these King Springs really well. These will come with fresh bump stops and also fresh nylon locking nuts so that you can do up the top mounts with them. And for now, just put them aside because the first thing you're going to need to do is jack up your car and take off your wheel. Okay, now that both sides of the car are jacked up and wheels taken off, let's take a look at what we've got going on in here. So obviously we'll be removing this spring and this shock, and as you can see, my shock is looking a little bit wet. The first thing we're going to do is get in the car, pop the hood and undo the top nut. So the top strut nut on the driver's side will be underneath your coolant reservoir tank. So you're going to need a 10mm to undo 2 bolts. And then you just wiggle this up and move it out of the way to expose your top nut just here. So this nut is a 17mm, 1/7. Now, if that starts spinning like it has for me, take a 17mm spanner and hold the top with a shifting spanner. You can usually lock your shifter against one of these bolts and just undo the bolt the rest of the way. There we go. Back underneath the car. If your shock is absolutely smashed like mine is, your rod will actually come all the way through and go back into the shock. So really now the only thing holding this whole thing in is the spring, but we're going to need to release the tension from this spring in order to be able to lift this whole thing out. And to do that, we need to undo a few things, and the first thing we're going to need to undo is this top ball joint over here. So take an 18mm and just undo this bolt. Check your ball joints here while you're at it. Mine's still pretty good. So really what you're doing here is giving yourself space for this. So now
the other thing we need to do is loosen the tension on this spring. So this whole thing needs to come down. In order to do that, we've got to undo a couple of things down below. So let's go quickly do that. For now, I'm just going to position this back here so this thing doesn't wobble around. Next, this is your brake line. So we're going to unhook it from its mounting position there, just so that we've got a little bit of giving room and that this brake line doesn't accidentally tear. Now see this bolt here? This is the link to your sway bar. So we're going to undo that. That's going to be a 14 millimeter. So once that bolt is loose, position a jack underneath your wheel disc brake and support the weight of this entire mechanism with a jack stand. Just take the tension off like that. Make sure that this top bolt is in, holding the top ball joint, because once you undo the other side of the sway bar will drop down, and you're going to need this bolt to hold everything up for a moment. So undo the other side as well. Do the same thing, undo that 14 millimeter. Now come back to this side and push this side of the sway bar link through as well. There we go. So now when you pull this out, the whole sway bar will swing down and out of the way. So again, with the disc propped up with a jack stand and this top bolt in place, we can now undo the bottom bolt that holds the strut in place. So that's that bolt over there. You might find that your tie rod end is in the way. Now, if that is the case and this tie rod end is in the way of your bolt and you don't have the right tools to undo this, you might have to remove this. So we undo this nut, which is an 18 millimeter. And you might have to give this a couple of love taps with a hammer. Okay, so with that out of the way, we've now got better access to this bolt. So get a 22 millimeter, and you will need to hold the other end with a big spanner. So put a big spanner on there and hold it while you undo this nut. Push the bolt through. Okay, so now this whole thing is loose. It's ready to come out. So all we're going to do is make a little bit of room to do that. We're going to undo this bolt now. Lift this up. Move this forward and just drop your jack down a little bit. And out she comes. So now to stop this from flopping around, you can do one of two things. You can just gamble and hope it doesn't fall over, but really what you're trying to do is you're trying to protect your brake line. So at this point, what I would do is lift this back up and put my bolt back in like that. So now that is nice and secure and this line is loose. So as you can see, this thing has seen better days. Just take a look at that. Not a very good look at all. This thing is clearly absolutely shot. So now we've got to do a little bit of prep work to put these on. Firstly, take one of your shocks. The shocks will have come with one of these little hooks. So just press it and hold it down. So that little hook will hold your piston in place so that this strut tower is easier to install into the car. Take one of the bump stops that came with the kit, and then grab one of your springs, feed it over the top, like so, and line the bottom mounting point up with the end of your spring, just like that. Now this bottom section is all good to go into the car, except we're missing the top perch. But that's not a problem because it's right here. So just take that off the car, feed this onto the top of your spring, and we're ready to put this in the car. Now to feed this in here, we are going to need to lower the jack a little bit and uncouple this joint. So I'm just going to hold this and lower the jack and undo this coupling. So I'm just going to lower this a little bit more just to give myself room. Okay, and then very carefully I'm just going to position this down here like so, watching my brake line. I'm going to feed this in, and as I do, down the bottom I'm going to put the large bolt in. Feed this in. Okie dokie, so just checking that everything still aligns, and when I'm happy with that, with the alignment, I'm just going to lift all of this up a little bit just to put a little bit of tension on the spring, checking that everything's still aligned here, and yep, we're looking good. And then I'm watching this ball joint, then I'm lifting the brake disc up and pushing this ball joint in. Okay, lifting this up a little bit more. So now that that's in, I'm going to take my bolt, feed it through. Okay, so now that I've got this top bolt supporting this top civvy joint here, I'm just going to put the nut on loosely so that I know that this won't go anywhere. I'm also loosely going to put this nut back on here so that this bolt can't slide out. So now the bottom of the strut is supported. It's time to get the top of the strut through that hole, just through there. So we're going to release the tension here on the strut. There we go. So just feed the shaft through and lift up the strut. Now take one of the supplied nuts with the nylon locking on the end, just loosely for now. Give it a couple of spins. We'll tighten this up in a minute, but for now all we want to do is for the threads to hold the strut in position. Okay, with the strut supported top and bottom, we're going to do up some of these nuts. First, the big one, this one over here. Remember, you need to support the other side with a spanner, and then just tighten this up. So this bolt needs to be 80 Newton meters, 80. Next we'll reattach the tie rod end. The tie rod end needs to be 30 Newton meters, 30. Next I'm going to reattach the brake line to the spindle. There we go. So now it's time to tighten up this upper ball joint here. So that's going to be 90 Newton meters, 90. All right, so with the other side, we're going to support the brake disc just as before. Now up here, things are a little bit tighter than on this side. We've got the ECU in the way and also the air ducting as well. And I've got a couple of fuses, which you can move out of the way if you want. This is the LPG one, but in there, that's the bolt you want to undo. You can reach in there and yeah, a socket, it's really going to do the trick here, and an impact gun. Otherwise, if you've got a spanner, yeah, you might have to make yourself some room. Probably take this air intake duct off to get a spanner in there properly. I think that would probably get you by Let's see how we go. Hopefully an impact gun will get that off. Okay, so I got it most of the way off, but yeah, it started spinning, so I'm gonna have to make some room for a spanner. So what I'm gonna do is take this pipe off, and hopefully that gives me enough real estate to reach in there and get this this bolt out. Okay, I think we've got this. Let's have a look. Yeah, there we go. Alrighty, so that's loose. Now we head underneath, undo the 18mm tie rod end bolt. Loosen up the top ball joint nut. Undo the brake line and undo the bottom strut bolt. Alrighty, I'm gonna take this bolt out. Lower the spindle with the jack. Now I can remove the rest of this bolt. And out she comes. Don't forget to take the top spring mount with you. Okay, same as before. We'll put this one in first, then the spring on top, and then put the big perch on the big end. It's good to go into the car. And bring your nylon locking nut with you. Whew. Okay, so I've got to say that little bolt took about as long as all the others combined, but yeah, there you go, just something to look out for. You are going to need to move this and then work around all of these little relays and things and vacuum lines to get that done up. But give yourself as much help as possible. Jack the wheel disc up as far as it will go, and then basically it'll bottom out this bolt, and then all you're really going to be fighting is that nylon lock nut, which only needs to be tightened to 30 Newton meters. So obviously I'm not going to get a torque wrench in there, it's impossible, but you know, it's good that it only needs to be 30 Newton meters, and that nut is a nylon lock nut. So yeah, I don't think it's going to get undone. I've just tightened it up as much as I can with hand, and I think that's going to do it. All right, so let's finish this thing up. There's a few things to button up, but we're kind of there. Upper ball joint, 90 Newton meters. Lower strut mount, 80 Newton meters. Tie rod end, 30 Newton meters. Okay, now we can feed the sway bar back in. So this is a 14mm nut, and it just needs to be 35 Newton meters. Ooh, that's not a good sound. Can you hear that wheel bearing? I see another DIY video in my future. Alright, time to do up the other side. Ah, that's better. Yeah, better. So there it is, my dudes, all done. Just sitting a little bit higher now, just perfect. In a couple of days this will settle, as springs do, and yeah, the right height will be nice and balanced now. That's the way I wanted it. I wanted like a hand's width in there, you know, not too much more. That gives me a little bit of suspension travel, and it's now even with the rear. So super stoked with how this turned out. It wasn't very difficult at all. As you saw, you only got to undo a couple of bolts. The really finicky thing will be up top on the passenger side, where you have to remove the air intake and have a thin 17mm spanner to do up the nut up top there to about 30 Newton meters. So don't stress too much about torquing it down, just make it good and tight, and you should be all right. The nylon lock nut will hold that in place as long as you bottom it out. But all in all, fairly successful little project today. I hope you liked it. If you do, hit that like button. The best way you can support me is to do that. Hit subscribe to see future videos. If you want to see that wheel bearing video, that's coming very, very shortly, because mine is absolutely stuffed. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell to see when that comes out. And yeah, get your tools ready, have a little bit of fun at home in your garage, much like I have today. And if you've got this problem at home, go ahead and try this on your car. Enough chit chat from me. I'll catch you next time.